you say hello to everyone. The moment you see them, it's rude if you don't say hello to them. And so within that, which is one thing I probably, if ever I work anywhere else, is I'll take that straight away. Is like when I was in Australia, you might say hello to half the boys, and the other half of the boys you'll say hello to through the session or throughout the day. But the moment you see someone for the first time in France, you have to say hello to them. You have to shake their hand and say, how ça va? So I think that's really unique here in France that I really like.
Welcome to the Upside Strength Podcast, your number one fitness and performance resource in Switzerland. On today's episode, I'm happy to interview Jonathan Ward. Jonathan is a strength and conditioning coach with the French Pro D2 team FC Grenoble Rugby. He also coaches online through SPS Athletic Development. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
No, cheers for having me. I appreciate it.
So I'm really interested in the current setting that you're in as a strength and conditioning coach at a high level in France, where the department of strength and conditioning is you plus three other coaches as well. So can you talk us a little bit about that setup that you guys have?
Yeah. So I mean, as we were chatting just before, so there's 4 preppers in the prepper squad. So I'm the newest addition to that team. So we've got Pat, who's our strength coach. You've got Ben, who's our speed coach, and we've got Rob, who's our rehab coach, and then myself. So it's pretty unique in that last year there was a head of high performance, and he left to go to La Rochelle. Johnny Claxton's his name, and it left the department without a head. And so they thought, rather than having a head of high performance, let's see how we can do with just, I guess, a level playing field, and we just contribute all together to the running of the department. And so I think it's definitely got its pros and its cons, and I think it's good in that it allows us to all come together. Like every day we sit down at the table, all 4 of us, and we're chatting about programming, we're chatting about what we can improve, what we like, and so everyone's got a voice. And I think it's good in that the group we have there's no egos in the group. They're a good bunch of guys, the kind of guys you can grab a beer with. So it's different to us where I've worked before, whether I've been an assistant, whether I've been a head, and or you've got a hierarchy that you're reporting to. Obviously we report to the head coach still, but no, it's a bit different, and it's liberating in that you don't have, I guess, anyone kind of overlooking you. You're afraid to stuff up sometimes, but and you can, and we're all supportive of one another in terms of, hey, listen, this didn't work out last week or yesterday or today, what can we do differently? And so as a prepper team or a group that I've been a part of, they're probably the most adventurous and more risk-taking group that I've been with. They're not afraid to fail. And if we do fail, it's like, okay, cool, we won't do that again. So so I speak pretty quickly. So in terms of the setup we've got at FCG, there's 4 of us preppers, and we work pretty close together. Even though we've got our roles and our responsibilities, but we I guess we all help one another in the gym. We've got a pretty big group. We have about 35 pro players, and then on top of that, there's about 10 espoirs that train with us full time too. So we've got about 40 to 45 players at one time. So with having 4 preppers there, it really makes, we have to work together. It's not like Pat could be in the gym on his own with, I mean, he could, he's very good and qualified, able to do that, but the attention to detail that he'd have on each player would be reduced. So even though I'm saying we've got Ben, our speed coach, and we're pretty lucky we've got 1080 machine, but we might have 2 or 3 stations of speed. So I might be on one of those stations that day, or Pat could be on that station. I could be in the gym on strength, for example, stuff like that. So even though we've got our set roles and responsibilities as a prepper group, we're very flexible in how we work together. And hopefully that answers your question a little bit. That's FCG. We're pretty. Long story short, we don't have a hierarchy. We're all on the same level playing field, and I think it's a good group of guys that have no egos, and we're not afraid to take risks. So it's a good working environment.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty constructive environment where you all communicate and kind of all pull in the same direction without trying to do stuff for yourself as a coach, which unfortunately we still see quite a bit. For those who aren't familiar with it, can you talk about the 1080 machine and what it does and what it's for?
So we've got a 1080 sprint. So it's pretty much, if you're not familiar, it's just like a box. And imagine like a barbecue, and it's got a cable that comes out of it. I'm simplifying it here. So it's got the capability to do assisted or resisted sprints. So you can either put it behind you, and much like like you're pulling a sled, for example, or it's got the ability to pull you faster, so you can do overspeed training. So we use that weekly. And we were pretty lucky that at one stage we had 2 1080 sprints. So we have one at Grenoble in conjunction with our university there, Grenoble University. So we collect data in conjunction with the university. So we're quite fortunate to have one. And then the French Federation Rugby actually sent down their 1080 machine to us. So for about 3 months there, we had 2 1080s and we're able to race the boys, both assisted and resisted. So yeah, it's a pretty good tool. You get velocity readings, you get power readings. In terms of tracking for us, it's great. We track the boys pretty much 2-3 times a week on the machine in the sessions too. So we might contrast with some squats, or in our speed sessions alone, we put the boys on it and do some overspeed. So it's a really good tool in terms of being able to give immediate feedback to players. It's very competitive. It really drives the players. The data we're collecting is just like continuous weekly, so we're able to really track like the players throughout the season. We know if boys are feeling a bit low, boys are feeling fresh. It's a quality piece of equipment. It's cost a little bit, but if you can get your hands on one, it's definitely worth it.
What are some of the metrics that you're looking at in terms of tracking the guy's status week to week, like you said? Because there's so much data that you can collect with those machines. It's a positive and a negative at the same time, because you have so much data, you don't know what to do with it. So what are some of the specific metrics you guys look at, and what gives you the most information on how the guys are feeling and doing?
Well, I won't just talk about, 1080, obviously we look at velocity and power there, but in terms of it's probably the first club I've been at where players don't come in the morning and they don't do their sit and reaches, they don't do knee to walls or anything like that. The players actually come in and it's on them to get themselves feeling good. So there's no actually screening process in the morning, which I can see when there's a score of 45 and you've only got 2 physios to do the screening process. Obviously, we could screen, but it's a big job. So there's no actual process of screening in the morning for players coming in, which is probably one of the limitations I would think, but not for me to say. But in terms of the gym, what we do, like conversations first thing, obviously chat to the boys the moment they come in. You can see if they're down, they're coming in, they're joking around, or if they're coming in a bit flat. Just have a chat to them. Generally, like we know the injury history of all the boys. So we know that if there's something today that might give their knee a bit of an issue or a shoulder, we can chat to them and try and modify around that. In terms of what we're testing in the gym, is that what you're asking? Test like what metrics do we look at in the gym as well, or more so the screening?
Yeah, just let's say performance metrics across the board during the week, and what gives you the most information on how the guys are feeling. Okay.
So within the gym, we use the OptiJump a little bit. So we get the boys doing some jump squats and that. And then we also use the 1080, like I mentioned before, we put them through that. We have gym wear as well. So it's not so much, you don't really look at it so much just to see if the boys are fatigued. It's more just to see where they are in terms of their lifting that week. And so if they're it's a bit of auto regulation, like we give them speeds that we want them to hit that session. If they have to take 10, 15 kilos off the bar to hit that speed, it's not something we're too worried about. Pro to do is a long season. It's 10, 11 months. So we know that they're not always going to be firing each and every week. If they're really struggling, then we might do something about it. On the field as well, we're pretty lucky. We've got the new Vector 7s, the Catapult GPS units this last season, and they've got so we've got live on the iPads, so we're able to see how the boys are moving. Recently, they've the Vector 7s, they've got the working heart rate built in within the vest as well.
Okay.
So we're able to check out the boys' heart rates through the sessions as well. We're able to see, hey, listen, he's struggling today. Like, look at his heart rate. He's near his max and he's not even moving. So we'll first off, we'll go make sure that his unit's plugged in, the heart rate for the vest is accurate. But sometimes you look at the boys and going, yeah, he's not too good. So it's not something official that we use, the heart rate monitoring within the GPS, but it's just another I guess, a metric that we can look at to, I guess, generate that conversation, go chat to them. So
yeah, so I guess there's no like set fast, we'll look at this and this gives us the information. It's kind of just looking for red flags, and if you pick something up, then you adjust on the fly kind of thing.
Yeah. Like I know that they do the check-ins every morning in terms of their. So I should have said this. They're checking on catapult. So how do you sleep? The sore areas of their body. But there's the player. I guess some players still miss it every morning, and you got to chase them up. And I guess that's where it's like, okay, well, we've got 30 out of 45 boys checked in this morning, and so I guess then that's where it's like, okay, well, like. Here in France, actually, one thing I think is really unique is, well, it might be in Switzerland too, I don't know, but you say hello to everyone. The moment you see them, it's rude if you don't say hello to them. And so within that, which is one thing I probably, if ever I work anywhere else, is I'll take that straight away. Is like when I was in Australia, you might say hello to half the boys, and the other half the boys you'll say hello to through the session or throughout the day. But the moment you see someone for the first time in France, you have to say hello to them. You have to shake their hand and say, how ça va? So I think that's really unique here in France that I really like. And it's within that first meeting, you can tell the way they shake your hand, if they're low, if they've got like 2 coffees in their hand whilst they're talking to you. So I think that is, for me, even though there's no set process in terms of making sure the players, like there's no screening in the mornings per se, unless they go see the physio themselves. So it's very much conversational. You use your own skills to really see how the boys are going. So it's different to where I've been in the past, but it's different. It challenges you more, and yeah, it's good.
Can you go a little bit deeper into this and how you unofficially screen the players as you say hi to them, and what are you looking for specifically? And if you maybe get a hint of something, how are you going to dig a little bit deeper to then make a decision for this player for that day? Hey, maybe we need to, pull back a little bit, or maybe he's fine.
Yeah. Body language is the first thing I'm looking for. Like some boys they come in, like some boys got their boom boxes playing, they're smiling, they're happy, they shake your hands, you've got handshakes with different players. And so if a player comes in and you don't do your handshake with them, or they don't do their handshake with other players, you're like, hey, hang on a second, this guy's feeling down. They might be dragging their feet along the floor. They're just, when they shake your hand, it's like a weak handshake, or they don't make eye contact or something, even though it's pretty rude if you don't make eye contact in France when you shake someone's hand. It's simple like that. So I guess body language is the first thing. When you say, hey, how you doing? Well, for me, if it's the French boys, it's a bit more difficult, obviously, because there's that language barrier. So for me, mostly working with the foreign lads here at FCG, it's as simple as, hey, how you doing? And you'll hear how they reply back to you, and they're pretty open. I think I've got a good relationship with the boys now, and that if I see something's wrong, like, hey mate, what's up? Or hey, how'd you sleep? Or how you been? Like, what'd you do yesterday? If it was a day off, and they might be like, oh, I just keep my feet up at home, just watch TV all day, or like we go out and we have coffees and stuff like that on our days off as well. The foreign group here at FCG is pretty close-knit group. So we do hang out a bit outside of work. So I'm able to kind of get a good vibe on where they're going there. In terms of if I see something that's wrong, like it's just the chat. I'm like, hey, what's up? They'll be like, oh, I slept bad and I've got a bad back. And it's like, okay, well, have you seen the physio today? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, we'll go see the physio, go chat to them. The physio generally have like, okay, well, rather than just getting on the table right away, here's 15 to 20 minutes of stuff you can do. Go away, roll out, trigger, do some mobility work, and then come back to us. And if you're still not feeling good, then get on the table, rather than just looking at the physio as like a quick fix. So we're kind of giving them a bit of autonomy. And then as well, like if we see that's like during winter time, the pitch at FCG gets pretty heavy, like pretty muddy. And so we find that the boys get like really heavy through the lower legs, the calves and the ankles as well. So it might be something like the players come in off, generally we do our gyms in the mornings, but say they come in the next day and they're pretty sore still, we'll just modify their dumps, maybe something like that. We'll just say, hey, listen, okay, instead of 4 sets to 3, instead of 4 reps, do 2, something like that. So something as simple as that, modifying the load on them. If we need to, older players some days as well, they get the option to choose whether they want to do an upper body instead of a lower body, or they get the option to do full body instead of a lower body. So I guess the older they are, they get the reward to be able to listen to their body more, and we give them more autonomy, a bit like Ash Jones does with his 4 quadrants. And if you've been around long enough, you get to pick your own program, not to the same extent in FCG, but you've proven to us that you're able to work autonomously, and you deserve to be able to have some say in your program. So it starts with a conversation, point them towards a physio, and it might be about modifying the gym program, and then giving them autonomy to be like, okay, well, it's heavy deads today. No, I want to do heavy bench instead, something like that. So, yeah.
How you talked about having a pretty adventurous team of strength and conditioning coaches. Are you able to talk about some of the wins you've had in testing stuff, and some of the disappointments or kind of no-goes that you had by being adventurous and trying maybe new things throughout the season or off season?
Yeah. Where do I start? Well, I guess one thing that we found out this season is Pat, who's our strength coach. He's doing his PhD with JB Morin, so we're quite lucky that he's got that relationship with JB and that they're quite good together. And part of Pat's PhD is testing every couple of months. And so we found out the first couple of months we were testing that we'd have, some boys really excel, some boys and some wouldn't, get some boys in the middle. And then a couple of weeks after, I think it was our 2nd or our 3rd testing, so like 4-6 months into the program, we decided to pull out the testing kit again. So we were testing their force velocity profiling. So we had the opta jumps, we had the radar gun for speed, and we had the 1080 testing their power as well. And like all the boys that did really shit on the testing day, they smashed their scores, and like everyone, and I think it was a bit of a mental thing on testing day. Some boys psyched themselves out. And so for us, it was, now I don't think we've got interrupted with Corona, but we're not going to be testing every 2 months. And this is a testing day, because mentally it gets to some of the boys. So for us, we found out, okay, well, let's just incorporate collecting data through the sessions, because some of the boys will be like this. And so if they were in the dam and we were collecting and testing data, but they come back up the following week, we're getting false data. I don't know. So that was one thing we found out. So now we do that. What's the other thing? Jeez, I had it on the tip of my tongue and I forgot. We found we had a bit of over Christmas time, the boys had a couple of weeks off, and then we came back and we had an away game first week back. Or we had a pretty heavy week coming back off the New Year Christmas break, and then we had a pretty heavy week leading into our first away game. We played in Aurillac, which is I shouldn't say, but it's like the shithole of France. Everyone calls it the shithole of France. It's the middle of France, and no one really likes to be there. I've got a mate who's there right now, so I apologize if he sees this. But and the turf there is really heavy, like a really heavy ground. And so they've had a kind of big week coming off Christmas. They played an away game and on a field that is really muggy. And then here in France, what's unique as well is you bus to most games. Like, I mean, if you're in the top 14, you get a bit more money. You can fly to games. But in the Pro Tour, we bus every game pretty much. So we've had a big week of training. We've played in a big game, and then we have to sit on a bus like 6-7 hours home again. And so that compounds on the boys. And, then within the next couple of weeks, we just had residual injuries. I think we had like maybe 5 or 6 injuries, soft tissue injuries in the lower extremities. And so we went back to the drawing board and we're like, okay, how do we stop this from happening? And so it was a learning curve for us, and that, okay, well, cool. We probably attacked a bit too hard coming off Christmas. We've got to be more careful on those away games, especially in winter. Like some teams, like we're pretty lucky at FCG. We have a hybrid pitch, so if it rains, if it's sunny, it's pretty good. Whereas some teams, when we played Biarritz, it was torrential downpour for 3-4 days before, and I mean, I'm standing in water up to my ankles, and the pitch is mud. So you've got to take into account pitch conditions as well. So we went back to the drawing board and we said, well, how do we stop this happening again? And so we realized, okay, on away games, within a week, we kind of have a player load. We look at load time, pretty simple stuff. And we said to ourselves, okay, well, we don't want our player load that week to say, I'm just going to put our random number 200 for the payload that week. And so we found out when we went back and looked at it, our player load that week of Christmas and off the game was 300, for example. Okay, well, fuck, off an away game, if we have a short turnaround off an away game, we don't want it to exceed 200. if we have a home game and then we have a long turnaround, say we play on a Friday and we don't play till Sunday, we can try hit 260, 270. So I guess for us it was about then how do we structure our training weeks differently on away games, on home games, on bus rides. Like if we play an away game an hour away, we can probably attack the week differently than if we played at Biarritz, which is like a 12, 13-hour bus trip. So it's that was a learning experience. I guess just it forced us to rethink how we're going to load away games and home games and stuff like that. Shit, mate. There's a fair bit I'm trying to think. I think those are the first two that spring to mind is testing throughout the season, right, to capture everyone. And then, I remember coming back off after Christmas and we had a few injuries. And we're very lucky that we have an open-minded skills coaching staff that know the importance. Like our head coach, Stefan Glass, he played for France and played in the 99 World Cup and he was a centre there. And he liked his preparation. He liked his physical preparation as a player, so he understands the benefits of it. And so for us, it's very like if he comes and sits at our table twice a week, and he's like, "How are we doing? What are we doing?" And it's a bit difficult. Like sometimes you hear the argument about GPS shouldn't run like training. Sometimes like we have GPS targets and stuff like that, and some people are very much 2K, bam, cap it. Some sessions he's we're very good now. Like we'll be like, okay, Steph, that's it. That's our targets. Rah, we're done. And he'll like wrap it up 1 or 2 plays later and we're finished. And I think this season we're very good in that our skills coaches they know that. Like if we've capped scrums at 10, there's only 10 scrums. If we cap jumps at 20, there's only 20 jumps. So we're very lucky that we have a supportive skills coaching group that understand player loading a bit better for us. And so we're able to then dictate to them, hey, listen, this is what we want this week. Work with this is your kind of outline. This is what you can work within. Go do it. And very rarely do they go over it. So we're very lucky.
It's interesting at the pro level, you guys have an upwards threshold. And I feel like this season I might want to try and have a minimum threshold for like, okay, per weeks, I need you guys to do, I need like lifting pods to do so many lifts. Week 1, 2, 3, 4, and I need you guys to do so many scrums at such intensity for so much time, because and something that comes back sometimes from the players is that, say during a scrum session or a scrum portion of the training session, that there's a lot of standing around and talking, which is necessary from an organizational standpoint, but then we also need to make sure that they get enough so that they're actually training the thing, and
exactly
getting 3 scrums in half an hour. So it's interesting that I guess at some levels you need to cap it, and at other levels of play you need to push to get a minimum done. Having worked at pretty much all levels of sport throughout your coaching career, have you encountered such situations where you had to encourage the skills coaches to do a little more maybe with their players because maybe they weren't loading them enough, considering the short window of opportunity that you had for training?
Yeah. So I guess first thought that springs to mind is, so when I was at Sunnybank back in Australia, and we're pretty lucky there that we were able to utilize some GPS units, or we had a full set for the team. And so I was able to, after every session, and what didn't give me live feedback, unfortunately, that was the downside to those GPS units, but I was able to, after every session, download the units, put together a report, and then send it to the coaches and be like, okay, listen, these are the targets for the session. We hit them or we didn't hit them. And if we hit them, cool, keep doing it. Let's keep, but if we didn't, then I'd be like, okay, how can we modify it? So I was pretty lucky there that I had some coaches that were open to that. If time got a little bit tough and like pressure gets to you, then they might be more inclined to say they think, do more, or they think, okay, well, we need to do more to get better. Or, they might think, oh no, we're doing too much, let's back off. So sometimes there was a case of overreaching or like, in which case then if they were going to do more, I'd have to back off. I wasn't going to be like, no, I'm still going to run my sets of tempos. I'm still going to, do my speed sessions and everything. So I'd have to kind of cut some parts of mine a little bit. And then there's other side of things where it's like, hey, listen, like we didn't unfortunately hit our targets this week. So next week we need to do more. I didn't so much have to worry about like the scrummaging. Like we had like Sunnybank is in Britain, Australia is historically it's a very good club. We've got I think we have like 9 senior teams. So we have like 5 men's, 3 under 20s and a women's. And pretty much, if you're not playing for the Queensland Reds that weekend in Super Rugby, you come back and you play for your club in Brisbane. So we used to have a couple of Reds boys. We used to have a few ex-Reds boys too. And so a couple of our coaches as well are ex-professionals. So they understood the benefit of, making sure that we stuck to our training plans. I'd have to say there wasn't so much an issue with the scrums and the lineouts. Like we were pretty set there. It was more the back standing around talking the whole time, like doing two plays and then looking pretty. So it was more about them. It's like, okay, boys, we need to make sure. What's this?
Standard back behavior, hey?
Yeah, mate, just like, oh, hey, how's my nails? Nah. So, definitely that there was times earlier on where I'd have to, I think anywhere really, you just have those conversations with coaches. And I guess that's where it's important to have a good relationship with the coach and sit down and plan. Like if you go in there with no plan, you just fly blind. And so I've worked with coaches that like make the session plans on the day. And so that's not ideal, but you've got to do what you can. And I've worked with coaches who have like plans like 2-3 months in advance, 1 in advance. And so they're not set in stone, those ones that go in advance. They're just kind of like frameworks that you can work within. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge when you've got to kind of give players and coaches a shove, but it's a good challenge.
Going back to Grenoble, where you are now, we talked a little bit, exchanging messages and emails about speed work that you guys do, and you mentioned some of the baselines that you want for each of your player group: front row, second row, third row, backs, etc. Can you go through those speeds in general? Because I think speed is, unless you have the equipment, well, now it's changing with stuff like My Sprint app and whatnot, where you can test speed and actually measure those things quite accurately with very little equipment. Whereas before you needed a radar gun or you needed a 1080 or stuff like that. But I feel like there's still it's still a very gray area for people that are not involved in high level sports because it's hard to measure speed. So can you give an idea at the pro level in France, what levels of speed are you expecting from your different players?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll just first off lead in by saying it all depends. Like, man, we have some props that can probably run close to 9. We have some back rows who can run well over 9. But I guess we're looking for at least a minimum. If I'm going to put numbers out there, I'd say like for our front row, like minimum, we're looking for 8.5 meters per second. Like we've got, at the end of the day, like our props aren't meant to be there for speed. Like they're meant to be like for scrumming, like especially in the préparateur. A préparateur is it's a front row, so fucking forwards, it's scrums, it's breakdowns, it's not very attractive rugby. So, but our forwards are like our props are around 8.5 meters per second. We have some that can push up to 8.9 meters per second. I'm trying to think, our hookers are actually pretty fast lads. So I think our hookers are actually getting close up to 9 meters per second, even though like they're pretty talented athletes, those guys themselves. They've got some good skills. So in the second row, like I guess you'd be looking for at least an 8.7, 8.8 minimum. Again, we've got some boys who can probably beat that, but I guess we're just looking for at least that minimum threshold. Back rows, 9s, like we've got boys well over 9s. Like I think we've got a couple of back rows that can run like 9.3. So that's pretty good for there. Inside backs are like halves, I guess, like our 9s and our 10s. Again, 9. In terms of our inside backs and our centers, we want minimum 9. For our wings, like area and our wingers and our fullbacks, I think we'd like them a 9.5 minimum. Like we know that anything under that like is not really fast enough. Like if you have a really good skill set but you don't have top end speed, it's okay. Like at the end of the day, like if you're good on defense, good on the high ball, you run good lines, like it's okay. Difference between 9.3 and 9.5 isn't going to make a difference. But I guess we're still trying to push them to get over 9.5. We have a couple of boys who can break 10. Like these guys are like freakish athletes. Just naturally, just really fast twitch. One guy is like really good shapes. Like he's tall, he's lanky, and he looks really good. And the other guy just like looks like he's just muscling it. Like he's just so aggressive. So one guy's like really smooth looking. The other one's just like really muscly. So like you can, yeah. So those boys are pretty good athletic wise. So like we put them on the 1080. We use our 1080 a couple of times a week within the actual gym session itself, and also on a field session. So the 1080. Like we put them on, like on a lower body day, we might do a heavy resistance over 10 or 15 meters. Depending on your force velocity profile, will depend on how much weight we put on you. Generally, we put anywhere between 20 and 30 kilos on the players, and we'll make them do it for like 3 or 4 sets, and that could be supersetted with something like single leg RDLs. Generally, if we superset it with like an accessory, and then put the boys to that, and then on the opposite, so that's more like acceleration focused day. And then we'll have like a max velocity focus day on the 1080, and that will be like a overspeed. So whether that be in the gym itself on another gym day, or we take it out on the field on maybe like say game day -3 or something like that. Like game day -3, we might put an overspeed, and they might have to do 1 or 2 35 meters. And so they'll tend to do like a 10-meter fly. So they'll have like a 15, 20-meter lead in, and then they'll fly for 10 meters. It changes depending on the field length we have access to, the field quality, if it's wet, if it's dry. And so, yeah, so we'll tend to at least put them through the 1080 twice in a week. Again, it all depends on the player. Like some players are old and we don't see benefit or risk. We don't risk putting them on an overspeed. What we might do is you might just be like, okay, you just run through the timing gates on a 10-meter fly. Mm-hmm. So if we have some backs that we'll put them through overspeed, generally our forwards, our type 5 will more likely put them through some gates, but the rest of the boys will overspeed. But it's difficult to say we do this or we do that, because it all depends on factors of that week. Like again, if the boys are feeling, if they haven't had high speed exposure recently, and we're going to overspeed them and it will just spike them really quickly, we'll just be like, nah, you go through gates and next week we'll overspeed, because obviously we want to like progress it slowly. We're not going to be like, hey, look, last week you only hit 85% of max velocity, max speed. We're not going to fucking overspeed you 110 this week. So we'll be like, okay, we'll do gates this week, and next week we'll do overspeed. So that's where it's the conversations with the prepper coaches as well. Like Ben's really good at keeping all that data, and we know where the players are at that week. We know, like, okay, last week you did 220 meters of speed, so this week we're going to just give him 1 extra rep. So it's a good environment, and it's a bit challenging at times to remember who's done what, but Ben's pretty good at keeping hold of that.
No, that's good. That's good information. Can you, off the top of your head, if you have those numbers and without going into too much detail, can you talk about what speeds the guys will actually hit in the game, and how it's rare that guys actually hit their absolute top speed in a game?
Yeah.
How important it is on the back end to train that top speed in training so that they're exposed to it.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, it's quite surprising for those, I guess, who haven't seen it, but like in trainings and in games, like players will very rarely hit above 90% of the max velocity. Like we'll have guys who score tries. And I'm like, man, that looks so fucking fast. And then I'll go back and look at their GPS. I'm like, but that was only a 9.3, and this guy runs a 9.8. Like, I'm like, shit, like he was still half a meter per second off his top speed. And so I guess it's really important. Like, and even then I'll see the GPS reports come through from games, and some guys who are 10 seconds per meter second guys, they ran like 8.8 meters per second. And obviously there's a bit of inaccuracy within GPS units. You have to accept that. But like if we just relied on trainings and games for them to get max velocity exposure, they actually wouldn't hit it. And so it's really important as for us as preppers, and this is what our coaches know. They know this, and so that's why they're so open to us doing speed work with the players a lot, and they know the risk involved in it. Like we haven't had too bad hammy injuries this year. Like we've had a couple of little grade 1s and stuff like that. Keep a couple of boys out for a couple of weeks. But in terms of like the payoff, like it's like a vaccine shot. Like if we don't do speed, the coaches know that like we're going to get more injuries, and so they're very open to us working really hard on the speed aspect. It's probably, I'd say, Benny, our speed coach, has done the Altus course, and I think he actually chats quite regularly with Stu McMillan. He's pretty turned on. But like Benny, our prepper, I think he's a 9. I think running he's like a 9.7 himself, and then I think he did an overspeed on the 1080 in his 10. So he's a really quick bloke himself. So he loves speed. So he's pushing for it for the coaches, and yeah. So long story short, it's important. If you don't do it, as preppers, if we don't expose the players to max velocity, they just don't get in training or games.
And on the other side of the spectrum, the part you're in charge of, the conditioning, can you talk about how you structure that throughout the preseason, and then how much do you actually do during the season? Do you catch up guys if they don't play games and stuff like that?
Yeah, so this was my first season with FCG. So when I came in preseason, I pretty much was they'd already planned their preseason. But I just came in and had a couple of ideas in terms of, hey, listen, like, let's do this drill, like as part of, whether it be like part of a field circuit for the boys, or like a couple of running drills that we do. But in terms of conditioning and pre-season, tempos, 50-meter tempos, 100-meter tempos, 200-meter tempos, MAS as well. So, we get we do the 1.2 shuttle, and we get the MAS score off that. And so we prescribe MAS. For running, that was generally it. I mean, there are a couple of different drills as well. There's like blacks and gillies and stuff like that, where the boys 20 back and back halfway, that kind of stuff. But I guess our main bulk of running conditioning was MAS or tempos. We played some conditioning. I have to think back now to what we did in pre-season. I have to think, I've had a few beers since then. We did some conditioning games like offside touch, the general kind of stuff. So we'd incorporate that. Like, one group would be doing a strongman circuit, one group would be doing tempos, and one group would be doing offside touch. And we just work conditioning-based work. In terms of in season, like, Podu does a very long season. I mean, we're quite lucky compared to top 14 in that we play 4 games and we get a week off pretty much, or like we get a weekend off. So it plans itself. It's like there's your block. We don't have to play European rugby or anything like that. So in terms of, so it's 10 months, still pretty long, but we don't really do too much on-feet top-ups because it is a long season. We do a lot of topping up off-feet, whether that be on the watt bikes and the rower, or circuits in the gym, really. If players do want topping up, and we generally do that, say we play on a Friday, and we're back on a Monday, we'll top up Monday afternoon with a bit of conditioning. But there's not too much of that going on. It's generally all off feet again, because it's like a long season. It's 10 months. And yeah, it's one thing I've had to get used to here is back in Australia, it's a shorter season. Like we actually get a longer pre-season in Australia and then a shorter season. And so we're able to, the boys actually run more per week. If you look at the GPS numbers, like back in Australia, the boys would run anywhere in pre-season week 20 to 30 kilometers in a week, depending on a high or a low week. Whereas here, in a week, we probably run max maybe 15 kilometers in the heavy week. That's not including games. Games, is on top of that. But so running wise, down south, you do a lot more. Whereas up here, if we want to top up conditioning, it's off feet. Players are actually fitter here, I'd say, definitely. But Does that answer your question? Sorry, man, I'm just rambling.
No, it's good. It's exactly what I was looking for. You talked a little bit about your previous experience in Australia. Can you maybe touch on those cultural differences that you've noticed between training rugby in Australia, training rugby in France, both at a significant level? So what are the main things that stand out that are different between the two?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I was just going to go physical capacity first, like the French boys all around are probably fitter. Like we have, I've never seen boys so fit. Like we have 3 boys literally run a 4 minute 17 1.2 shuttle. Like these 3 guys are just and they cross the line within 30 centimeters of one, bang, bang, bang. Like, I mean, they were freaks. And we've got one guy who's 20, one guy's 22, and then there's our older bloke who's 30, and he's still keeping up with these boys. So in terms of fitness, as a whole, I think French boys are a lot fitter. Size-wise, obviously they're bigger down in Australia in rugby players. I think we've got obviously a bigger contingent of Islander Polynesians down there. But even the white boys back home, I think the gym culture at home is a lot bigger than it is over here. At high school level, it's getting bigger there. It's not as big as America in high school, but it's getting there. I guess the GPS schools in rugby back in Sydney and Brisbane, it's big now. Even 10 years ago when I was at school, gym was there, and rugby boys and the rowing boys were in the gym. So I guess power and size, Super Rugby. Fitness, you'd probably say France here. Skills, you'd say down at Super Rugby, I think I mentioned to you before, in warm-ups, if you want here in France, the boys will gravitate towards a soccer ball, they want to walk with the soccer ball. Whereas if back in Australia, it's just not part of the DNA. It's rugby. You pick up rugby ball and you're practicing your offloads, you're practicing your spiral kicks, you're passing, all that kind of stuff. Not to say that the French boys here, some of them don't pick up a rugby ball and do it themselves, but if you give them an option, the boys would rather play with their soccer ball than the rugby ball. And I guess even at school, I remember when I was at school and even at clubs, boys come to training before trainings or even at school all around. So it's culturally, it's obviously soccer is national sport in France, and well, I don't know, it's what's that game called, patong or something like that, where they throw the ball. So, yeah, so that might be the national sport, but so I guess capacity-wise, the French boys are fitter, the boys back home are bigger, stronger. Probably in terms of speed, probably the same, to be honest. I wouldn't say that there's too many. Like, we've got a couple of fast boys here, and then I guess I've touched on here, the professionalism back home in Australia is probably a bit higher. When you've only got in Australia, where you've got 4 Super Rugby teams plus, I guess, the Western Force there coming back into rugby, I think. So you've got like 5 professional teams in Australia, whereas here in France, you've got 14 in the top 14, you've got 16 in the Pro de Deux, and then you have some Federal 1 clubs too that pay their players. So you've got back home 5 pro teams. Say there's 30 boys in each team, so that's really competitive. So if you get 30 boys in a team back in Australia, you know that they're good, and they want to be there. Not to say that boys here don't want to be there, but you've got to fucking bust your nut to get into a Super Rugby team back in Australia. Whereas here, it's okay, you could be, you could be an okay rugby player and you get a contract in Pro de Deux. And then some boys are I'm generalizing here, but some boys are happy with that. Some boys want to be Pro de Deux. That's fine. I wish I could be Pro de Deux. I was never a good enough rugby player to play in this. So, so back home, the professionalism is a bit there, in terms of the players that they turn up and they probably try harder week in, week out. But yeah, I guess it's the French boys. I've found that they're more passionate. They're actually more passionate, emotional people. So they wear their heart on the sleeve a lot more. So I guess if you can tap into that, then they'll give you 100%. So I think that's one thing I found with the French. Even the French people, more passion and emotion than back home. So if you can somehow work that in, their work ethic is crazy. Yeah.
No, that's good info. And you talked a little bit about the professionalism of the structure and the players. Are there noticeable differences between the structures in terms of the staff in the different clubs? More or less strength and conditioning, or let's say coaches, more or less physios, more or less skills coaches?
Yes. So I guess here there's more preppers here, and I mean I can only speak for FCG. Back in Australia, when I was interning, then I was at the Reds. It was you would have Reds right now. You have Damien Marsh, head of high performance, and you have Shackers, who's the strength conditioning coach, and they're the 2 strength, and you have Georgia, who's the sports scientist there, and so there's 3. That's just 3 there. So technically you only have 2 strength conditioning coaches, whereas here at FCG we have 4. I guess, and then in terms of your coaches, here we actually have they're full time. We have head coach, assistant coach, scrum coach, defense coach, skills coach. So we have kind of 5 of skills coaches. Whereas back in Australia, you probably, again, generalizing, some teams might have 3, some teams might have 5. So it all depends, I guess, on how much money you got. I guess the skill set of the coaches. I remember when I was at the Reds, you had Nick Stiles in my first year there. And Stiles, even though he was a head coach, he was also the scrum coach. So, and I guess, so whereas here we actually have a scrum coach. So I guess if you can, back in Australia, if you had a head coach, you could also do scrums. That limits your need to have a scrum coach, I guess, on the books.
Switching gears a little bit towards your SPS Athletic Development endeavor, can you talk a little bit about what you do there and what are you doing with this?
I've got to plug my own business now. I'm not really good at plugging this. Normally, I think as all SMC coaches, we hate doing it. I think Kierwin and Flat says it perfectly. We've got to be like salespeople. You just got to, you've got to push yourself. And SPS Athletic Development. So strength, power, speed, athletic development it's a brainchild of me and my twin brother. I've got a twin brother who's also a strength and conditioning coach back in Australia. And I guess it comes from, just before Corona actually happened, we were thinking to ourselves, well, okay, are we going to coach in professional rugby for the rest of our lives? Do we have another income in case something like Corona happens? And I guess it's again, if being your own boss. I've been my own boss once before, actually. For about a year, I had my own massage and personal training business, and it was experience. It was good. I got to set my own hours and that kind of stuff. And so whilst I'm not finished in pro rugby yet, I wanted to start something up that later down the track I could jump into. And having a twin brother as well, like we're very similar, which isn't always a good thing. Like sometimes it'd be good to have someone who has different mythologies and philosophies to me, so we could challenge one another. But so I coach over here in France and he coaches in Australia. And I guess at the moment in time, we're like, hey, listen, let's just get a little bit of a social media presence. It's a bit of a soft introduction. Like we're gonna put out some more content, obviously, once Corona's finished, because but yeah, like we'll just do all things athletic development. Probably goes against the grain of what some people say if you don't have a point of difference and kind of fuck off. And it's like, well, at this stage, I don't have a point of difference. I'm just another strength coach. You probably see tons of Instagram influencers with like 1.1 million followers spouting the exact same stuff I spout, or even like worse stuff probably. The dream would be to get picked up, like just automatically like get 1 million followers and then just like make money off them. I don't know. But so we started off SPS to as a later down the track maybe grow into something bigger. Right now it's on the back end a little bit. I have a couple of people who are at least I used to coach. I still coach privately through their same programs monthly. And my brother back in Australia, he's got people on his But I guess for us it's about putting out scientific backed strength conditioning practices, rather than the kind of fluffy stuff you see on Men's Health or something like that. So, and then in the other realm of that is to hopefully get a bit of clientele through there, just another income stream. It sounds like I'm being pretty blasé about it. Like if you wanna come get a program off me, I'll pay 100% attention to you and I'll treat you like a king. But like at this stage, it's early days still. But yeah, Twitter is normally where I'm at there. Yeah.
We'll make sure to list all that on in the show notes. Where can people find a bit more about you then, personally, in your career and your background until now then?
Definitely Twitter. I guess just add me and give me a follow on Twitter. I'll give you a follow back. And if you've got any questions, then I guess send them through there. I like to talk. I like to have coffee. I like to have a beer. You can probably tell I've been talking a lot today. So if anyone's in France around Grenoble or anything like that, just let me know. Or when I'm back in Australia or anywhere really. I like at conferences. I like going to conferences more for the freebies and the free t-shirts. Like I think I've got I love t-shirts. Like I think I've got like maybe 5 bowls t-shirts. I've got like 5 play t-shirts as well. They're my like free gym kit is the best thing. So so I've got give me a follow on Twitter. If you're in the south of France, let me know once Corona's over. And hopefully, obviously I can't get down to ASCA conference this year. I didn't go last year, but I might hopefully go to the UK SCA next year. Is it this year? And later this year, I don't know. It depends on Corona. We'll wait and see. But I like conferences. I'll go to like 1 or 2 of to the actual presentations. The rest of the time you'll just find me there at the coffee, just chatting to people in between. So it's good.
It's probably the best thing you can get out of conferences is the networking and meeting people and getting contacts for later on. The presentations are obviously valuable and good to look at, but the Q&A sessions and then the meeting people in between presentations is where it's at, right?
Big time, 100% agree. Yeah, you get to know people a lot better, and I mean, it's an expensive ticket to just go network, but it's worth it, I think. So yeah, that's why you need to get the club to pay for you. If you can get a club to pay for you, it's all good. That's no. So
fully agreed. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today, and hope we'll talk soon.
No, definitely. Cheers. Thanks for having me on, and hopefully you guys have taken something out of this. And if not, just send me a message.
Sounds good, man.
Cheers.